because I have to jump off here about 5 to 10 till. Brianna should be in a little bit to answer questions like after I jump off, because I have a class at 3, like right after this one ends, that class starts. So I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't give myself even 5 minutes. So I'm like, okay, cool. But I'm sure most of you kind of know a little bit about my background. So I am going to go through a little bit about me, and then the differences between Oracle and Tarot, how to choose the right deck, how to dedicate, cleanse, and charge a deck, and then also shuffling, how card flying basically, and a few different layouts and some little tips and tricks that will help set you guys apart from other readers. And my mala keeps moving over under my arm. After this class, you guys will be on TikTok, or you'll be watching other people on whatever social media, and you'll start to notice these things, and you'll notice really quickly which readers have been doing it a while, which ones are very professional, connected to their cards, and which ones are not. Are not. I'm just gonna say it that way. You'll notice immediately, because in teaching like April and Bree and some of the people around me, they'll send me stuff all the time like, oh my God, look at this. And I'm like, I know. So you'll become an expert very quickly on how to spot if someone actually knows their stuff or not. So let me talk just a tiny bit about me so you guys know my background a little bit. I have been reading cards professionally since 2014. I had some cards, have read for other people in the past. I never have read tarot, even though I love tarot. I love the decks. I love how they feel. I love the look. I love all of the thing about them, but I don't connect with them. I have like 6 tarot decks and I don't read. I keep buying tarot decks. I don't read with any of them, but I do love them. My first deck of Oracle cards, when I got them, I immediately connected with them, and I was like, oh, okay, this is me. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I love this. So the first place that I started reading for is a big website, an app called Purple Ocean. So I was reading for people all over the world. Like, I went from just reading for family and friends to that, like it was crazy. And so I started off reading for 15 to 20 people a day and went from there. So I literally threw myself right in the fire. There was no learning curve there with me. So, but I really love it. And ever since then, after I finally took that step and started reading professionally, I have built on how I read, how I do things, and so on. I'm self-taught. I have had a couple of mentors that have helped me along the way with, not so much with Oracle cards, but with a lot of my practice. But Oracle cards themselves, I'm pretty much self-taught. So that's why I started teaching this class, because I noticed that there were a lot of things that I do that a lot of people don't do. And with the length of time I've been reading, oh, I apologize, let me turn that off. With the length that I've been reading, I have people that come to me repeatedly over and over and over, and have for years. I'll have people that randomly will message me a year later or 2 years later even, be like, oh my God, you said blah, blah, blah was going to happen. All of that just happened. And so it always makes me feel good to get feedback from people. And April can tell you too. So she.
Year and a half, not one time have I heard anyone ever say she was wrong. Not once.
I don't know if you guys heard that or not. Did you? Oh, they didn't hear you.
In the full year and a half or more, maybe year and 7, 8 months we've known each other, I have never once heard someone tell her she's wrong. Not once. And I've been with her a lot. Not once.
So, and April's even had some things that I read for her when I first started reading for her, that she's come to me 6, 7 months later and was like, oh my God. So some people expect that cards, especially Oracle cards, are going to tell you what's happening right now. It's going to happen in the next hour, day, whatever. is not always the case. So with me, as I've built my own skill, my own ability with tarot, with oracle cards, I read completely different than most people do. In that, instead of reading with one deck or maybe a couple decks, if I do a full reading for somebody, whether it is where, you know, past, present, future, or whether it's something different, I read with anywhere from 7 to 10 decks at a time. So I will take up the majority of a table, a desk, etc. And it sounds like it would be too much to figure out, but I encourage you guys, as you're going on your own practice, to start incorporating more and more decks in, because with oracle cards, every deck is for something different, and we're going to kind of morph into that. With tarot, every deck is the same. You have to learn all the suits. You have to learn the major arcana. You have to learn how they interact together. So it's a lot of memorizing up front. And from there, you're simply interpreting the artwork. So you will have tarot decks that are for shadow work, that are for relationships or whatever, because the artwork is different. Doesn't change the meaning of the card. It just, you have to take that meaning for that item, for the relationship, for the shadow work, etc. But for the most part, all tarot decks are the same. So once you put that initial investment that you've memorized all those cards and the meanings, you can pick up any tarot deck and read with it, just interpreting the artwork. With oracle, it's completely different in that every single deck is different. So I have a whole bunch of decks, and I'll show you guys a few of them. I have decks that are this. I have this deck in 2 sizes. This is the pocket edition because I have little hands, so it fits my hand better. The other ones are, I want to say they're this size. The other deck is this size, but it is almost twice this thick. So I physically can't wrap my hand around it. But I have decks that, this one I think has 72 cards in it. And then I have some decks that only have 15 or 20 cards in them. I'm trying to pull out some different decks. Normally I have them out, but I may or may not have been stuffing my face. So every single deck is for something different. So when you choose a deck, a lot of people will they'll kind of pause, they'll kind of freak out a little bit because they're worried about choosing the right deck. Don't worry so much about choosing the right deck as choosing the deck that resonates with you, because the deck that you choose, you're choosing it for a reason, even if you don't know it yet. The first deck that I ever bought for myself was an Archangel Tarot or Oracle card deck. I'm not an angel person. I don't do anything with them. I don't work with them. I just don't. I'm not connected to them in any way. Yet when I saw that deck, I was like, oh, I have to have that deck. Like I just knew it. And it literally was one of my favorite decks for the longest time. You're going to hear people that will tell you that you can only get a deck if someone gifts it to you. If that was the case, I would never have a deck. I would have never started reading. I just wouldn't have a deck, because I grew up with parents that if we wanted something weird like that, they were kind of like, okay, well, let's do that and let's learn about it. So I had a deck of playing cards that had little things on them that taught you how to read playing cards when I was younger and things like that. Most people don't have anyone around them that even knows they want to read cards, or they would like to get a deck for Christmas or their birthday or whatever. So don't ever feel like you cannot buy your own deck. It will become an obsession and it will become a problem. I have a severe addiction to buying decks. I think I'm over 50 something now. And they're all for different things. They're all for different things. So that's why I was pulling out some of these different decks, because I know if you guys have ever heard me read on TikTok or whatever, you've heard me talk about anchor cards. You've heard me talk about shadow work decks and so on. So every deck is for something completely different. I have decks that are only for shadow work. They only tell me what's going on with somebody, what they need to work on, etc. I have starseed decks. I have healing decks. I have past life decks. I have mediumship decks. As you guys start building your collection, and Haley, I saw your message, as you guys start building your collection, you will start to have favorite decks. You will start to develop your anchor decks. So for me, and you can call them whatever you want. I just personally call them an anchor deck. Whatever the anchor decks that I have are ones that every single read, that deck goes in a specific place. So for example, I have my Dark Goddess deck that it's just different goddesses and they all have just one word at the bottom. So Persephone is compliance, Scotty is atonement. So this is the very first deck that gets pulled out that I draw cards from when I'm reading, because this anchors the person. It tells me what's going on right now with them. So it gives me an immediate overview of where they are. So I always draw a card from that deck. And then I have a shadow work deck that always goes second. That's my other anchor deck. Just those two cards give me an amazing overview of where you are right now. So if I were to pull atonement and then revenge or guilt, I would know immediately that you have something that you've just been going through that you feel like you are atoning for, that you feel like either you got the short end of the stick, you feel guilty about, etc. So then I'm like, okay, I automatically know you're kind of in a little bit of a darker place right now. So now it helps me with where the rest of the cards go. And that was just an example, but the other anchor decks that I only have 4 out of all my decks. I only have 4 anchor decks. One is my Dark Goddess deck. The next one is my Shadow Work deck. The next one is actually this deck here. It's my shaman, my mystical shaman deck. This one I use at the top of a line because it tells me what that line, it anchors that line for me. So for example, if I drew Beauty Way at the top of somebody's line, I know, and I will talk about how to learn the meanings really quickly, but I know just working with this deck for so long that this right here is a very spiritual card. It's walking a very spiritual path because the pink lotus is a symbol of Buddhism. The dragonfly is kind of between both worlds, etc. So it tells me that they're really straddling the normal versus the metaphysical. From there, I intuitively choose decks until I get to the very last card. And depending on what I'm reading for, depends on what anchor deck I use at the bottom. I have a healing deck that goes at the bottom that tells me why you're going through all this shit right now. Usually I use those for past, present, future, for relationships, for, it just fell out of my brain, for soul readings, things like that. Or I have an Isis deck that goes at the bottom. And that one kind of sums up everything I've just said to the person. This deck is an interesting deck and we'll talk about it here in just a minute. But as far as types of decks go too, there is Miss Bree. As far as types of decks go too, as you guys get decks, you're going to notice that some of them are normal and some of them you cannot read with like normal. When I say normal, I mean that they have a back and they have a front. So when the backs are all down, they all look the exact same. You're going to find some that this one is, I pulled this one out on purpose because this one has a front and a front. So you cannot read with it like normal. Because if you read with this one like normal, this is what the back of the card is supposed to be. If you read with this like normal, and you let someone go through and shuffle and pick the cards, they're going to look at the artwork and they're going to go, "Ooh, I like that one." And they're going to A, take forever to pick out a card. And B, they're going to pick it based on the artwork. They're not going to pick it based on their intuition. The backs of the cards have writing on them. So what I usually do with this one is if it's at the end of a row, I draw the card and I let the card sit there. And when I'm at the end of the row, I literally hand it to the person and let them read it. Because it means more them reading it and feeling that butterfly in their gut when this card just sums up everything for them really nicely. I don't use this deck as much as I used to, and I don't know why. So It is what it is. But I also have hand painted decks that are my personal hand painted decks. And this is something people always ask about. Don't ever be afraid to create your own deck, guys. I have 4 or 5 decks that I've hand painted that I use for specific purposes, because as I've gotten further and further in my practice and my reading, I will sit and go, man, I really need a deck for this. And I will search and I will look and I can't find one. And so then I'm like, well, shit. Okay. And at first it really depressed me because I was like, well, hopefully somebody will make one day. And then I thought, you know what? You've been an artist like your whole fucking life. Why don't you just make a deck? And so once I made my first deck, it's kind of all easy cheese from down there. I have some that are on just regular business card paper, like the thicker business card paper. And then these are actually hand painted playing cards. I think these are actually, believe it or not, Disney cards underneath there. So it's kind of funny, but get as ornate as you want to. Create your own deck. It makes you, when you're reading with them, somebody in front of you, if you have a hand painted deck that no one's ever seen before, it immediately makes you more intriguing because you're cool enough to have a hand painted deck. Even if you made it, even if you look at it and you're like, oh God, this looks like shit. You still have a hand painted deck, which is something a lot of people do not have. It's not a thing anymore. So never be afraid to create your own deck, guys, ever. Even if you just get cardstock and let me see if I can grab it. So this is actually a relationship deck that I created. It's literally on cardstock and it has runes and stuff that I created on it. I created it because I needed a better relationship deck than what was out there. And to me, I'm like, oh, this looks like shit, but everybody loves it. So I'm like, okay, it's very simple. It's very easy to understand, to look at. They're just runes that I created really quickly. You can literally write whatever term you want on there. You don't have to have artwork at all. I have friends that have ones where they just wrote a word on it and they're fantastic. So when you do get your own decks, or you start, having the problem with buying a lot of decks, like Haley said that she does, always choose one that resonates with you. I'll have a lot of people ask all the time about how to choose the right deck. Pick the one that resonates with you. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll be on Amazon, or usually it's Amazon anymore, but I will end up having about 30 decks in my cart and I'll be like, oh God, you can't buy all these decks at one time. So I'll go through and look and I'll just start slowly putting them in the save for later cart until I end up with 1 or 2 decks in there. But I don't ever pick it based on what I need. I've learned the hard way not to do that. I base it on that feeling I get in my gut, and everybody has that feeling that resonates with them differently. So for me, either my hair stands on end on my arms, or it's like someone's pulling my belly button straight back to my spine. Like that's how I know something that's the right thing for me. Everybody has something different. So trust yours, guys. Once you get a deck, you need to cleanse it, you need to dedicate it, and you need to charge it. Depending on where the deck came from, trust your gut on how much you need to cleanse it. For me personally, no matter where a deck comes from, I do the same ritual with it to cleanse it, whether it's from a shop or from Amazon. You don't know who handled that deck. You don't know who handled it when it was being boxed up. So you could have somebody that had the shittiest day of all shitty days when they were boxing that deck up, or when they were unpacking it, or when they were putting it in the bag when you bought it at the shop. You just don't know. So I always cleanse every single deck the same way. When I get it, the first thing I do is I open it and I take every card out. I love Blue Lotus oil, and so I will put some on my hands and rub it around. So it's kind of like on my hands, but not going to damage the cards. And I will pick up and I will literally look at every single card. So I will go through and I will look at every single card and I will touch it and just look at it. I will study all the artwork. Like I can spend over an hour just looking at a deck sometimes, because you want to know the card. You want to know each card. Doesn't mean you have to go through and read the book right then, but once I do that, I will take the deck and the box, and I have just some of the large plastic platters that you can get at dollar store, Dollar Tree, whatever. And I will put down a layer of coarse salt, depending on how I feel, because I've gotten a couple of decks that were gifted to me that I was like, well, okay, you got some shit. So I will put, sometimes I put other herbs in there. I had one deck in particular that I put some pink Himalayan salt, I put rosemary, I put all kinds of stuff in this salt bed. I set the box and I set the cards on it. I also will take a big piece, I have a big selenite stick about like this, and I lay it across the top, and I will let it sit there for at least 24 hours, sometimes much longer. In the case of that deck, it sat there for like a week and a half. Once that's done, I usually let them sit on my altar for a little bit, whether it's just a day or two or whatever. My altar is also right next, it's not next to my bed, but like the window's here, the altar's there, there's a little walkway, and then there's my bed. So it's right there. When my altar, before I moved here, my altar was in the other room. And so I would set them next to my bed on my nightstand. I just kept them near me while I was sleeping, because your room is your safe space. It's your sacred spot. It's where you relax, that's where your Zen is. That's where you sleep. So I personally put mine either on my altar or on my bedside table. I do know a lot of people that use several different techniques to connect with them as well. You can put them in your pillowcase. You can tie them with a ribbon and put them either in your pillowcase or next to your bed. I messed up a deck pretty good, even though I'm not a tosser at night. I had a deck that I ribboned and I put in my pillowcase, and I damaged 2 of the cards. So I have not done that again, because I felt so horrible when I saw that the cards were bent and I really couldn't use them anymore, because it was now obvious which cards they were. So I personally don't do that anymore, but I know people that is how they connect to and dedicate their deck to themselves. So feel free to do whatever resonates with you guys. Don't ever feel like, okay, so-and-so said this, so I have to do that with my decks. They're your decks, and you need to connect with them how you need to connect with them. I also will sit and meditate with mine, sometimes right after I get them before they go in the salt bath, sometimes afterwards. I will just sit and meditate with them for 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't even have to be very long. I'll hold the deck in my hands out of the box, and I'll just sit and hold them. Sometimes I'll shuffle them as I'm meditating. It's just getting your energy in with the cards and the cards' energy with you. It's getting everything aligned. Once all that's done, I will always set my cards in the full moonlight. Always. If I have a brand new deck, I will set them in the new moon as well. This is partially why I have my altar in front of the window, because I have so much shit that I'm happy to just put it on my altar, and then it gets all of the moonlight, sunlight. So if there's a solar eclipse or something, everything goes on my altar as well. Feel free to use anything and everything that resonates with you guys to dedicate, to cleanse, to make a deck your own deck. Before I go too much further on that, what kind of questions do you guys have about those aspects? About cleansing or dedicating or anything like that? You guys are going to make this easy.
So like for the salt, does it have to be like the rock salt itself, or I can use anything?
Nope, you can use anything. The only thing I would recommend is non-iodized salt. I have had iodized salt damage some cards, and I don't know if it's because, if it's whatever they put in it, if it's the iodine, whatever they put in it. So if you're going to lay your cards directly on the salt, I would just recommend non-iodized. I love sea salt. And so at Walmart and Target, all those, you can find the big containers in the food area for like $1. So I'm all about that. Or if you have a Dollar Tree, they have coarse salt and sea salt, a big container for $1 as well. So I usually keep tons of salt in my house and not for eating. So, but yeah, it can be any type of salt. Like I said, there's times when I pulled out the pink Himalayan salt. I also have black lava salt. Like, yeah, it can really be any type of salt. So, yeah, totally trust your gut on what you feel you need as far as salt goes.
And how do you know, like, for how long you have to cleanse the deck?
So here's what I do. Because every single deck I have sits for a little bit of a different time. I'm trying to put some of these up here so I don't knock the rest of them over. I'll leave them on there. Say I get a deck in the morning and I get the salt ready and I lay them on the salt. I will come back that evening and just kind of pick them up, lay my hand on them. And if I feel like they're good, then they're good. Now, if I put my hand on them and it's like, you still got some funky shit, I'm going to leave you there. I'll leave them there. So absolutely trust your gut. This is where trusting your gut comes in. I have not listened before when I first started really reading professionally. And I picked the deck up and I started using it too soon and it didn't seem to read correctly at all. It was almost like it was just scatterbrained. So I ended up putting them back on there and I left them on there for like a week. And when I got them back off, they were good to go. So just trust your gut on it.
Okay. And like post reading, if you're like, do you cleanse deck every time after a reading is done?
That's a good question. I personally do not anymore. I used to when I first started, A, because I usually had time in between reads, but B, because that's what I had heard, that you had to cleanse between every single time. So I do not anymore because I connect personally with each one of my decks. Like I said, I sit and meditate with it. I sleep next to it or like right there next to it. I dedicate them to me, like they're my decks. That's why I put my oil on my hands and everything. I also, right next to my desk here, I have a cedar box that all my decks sit in. They don't ever go back in the box unless I'm traveling. The only one that goes back in the box is my Norse deck, and I don't know why, but it goes back in the box when I read with it, it goes back in the box. But even it still sits right here next to the cedar box. So because I'm Celtic, cedar is, and Native Americans that are this way too, cedar is a holy wood. It's used to cleanse, it's used to clarify, and it's used to bless things. So all my cards go in that box. I also have selenite that sits right here. So if I feel like if I've had a really heavy evening reading or something like that, I'll put selenite over them too. But I just am super connected with my cards. So I don't feel the need to cleanse them every time. But if you guys are just starting out reading and you feel you need to, then absolutely do it. I have had a few times when I've had a very heavy read, like a personal Zoom appointment read, and I have cleansed my whole space a couple times after reading. So just trust your gut on how you feel if you need to cleanse them or not.
And one last question about selenite.
Yes.
Like there are some, like I started getting into crystals recently, and I see some selenites being available for very minimum amount of dollars versus like some are really expensive. Because now with crystals, they have come up with the authentic crystal versus the one that are factory made, right? So how do you know the difference between them?
So selenite in general is pretty widespread. Now there are different colors of selenite, and that's when usually you get into the higher dollars, but selenite in general is pretty cheap. So I've got a couple of examples right here. So for like this little piece right here, if I was going to buy this at a shop, I would expect to pay anywhere from $3 to $5 for this. I was looking to see if I had bigger pieces. Oh, I do.
Yeah.
So palm stone, I have a lot. I love selenite. I have a lot of selenite. So this palm stone I paid 20 bucks for. And then I carried it around with me. Do not carry selenite in your pocket because I dropped this and broke it. It's actually got a huge slice down it where I glued it back together. Oh, thank you, April bought these. So this one here, I would expect to pay about 10 bucks for. You can see you see the difference, like anywhere from 10 to 12 bucks for this one. That's a huge piece. With selenite, it's very hard to fake. It's very hard to fake selenite. If you're at a place where you can touch it, it will usually have kind of a powdery, it almost looks like snow that comes off it. Like, you know, the fake snow machines where they spit out that, it looks like that. Like it's very, well, it's hard to see. It's very shiny, it's very glittery, but it's also fibrous. So you can see that. So if you drop it, it will break. Now, if you, I'm clearing off this piece back here because I also have a selenite dagger that's about this long that I paid about 25 or 30 bucks for. Carved selenite is usually going to be a little more. So I don't know if you guys will be able to see. Yeah. So this piece here was about 50 bucks because it's a full plate and it's carved. Now with this one, I will try to show you a little bit. If you guys get a bigger piece, so smaller pieces like this that are the actual, I'm trying to turn it so you guys can kind of see it. Well, I caught it and then it stopped. So that look, when they're raw like this, they're going to be fibrous. You're going to see the fibers in them. When it's a plate or a firm piece, can you see the back? Can you see how it's got like see how it's got pockets? This one actually, that tells me this has quartz in it, that it's not just selenite, it has quartz in it as well, which that makes it go up a little bit. Here we go.
You want your spear?
I'll get this one down right here. Yep. So a spear of selenite is going to, I'm trying to get it where you guys can see it a little bit. I don't know if you can see, it has the striations in it. So if you see them with the pockets, that should tell you right there, it has some quartz in it. All selenite grows around quartz. So the ones that are towards the edge are going to have the quartz in it. And you're going to get some people that say, oh, well, I can't use it because it's got quartz in it. Fuck that. Like I always will gravitate toward a piece that has quartz in it because quartz amplifies everything in that stone. So if you have a stone that has quartz on it, like all amethyst will have clear quartz at the bottom of the big raw pieces. I'm all about that because it just amplifies all the stuff that stone does. But selenite will always be this beautiful, milky, clear color, and it will always have those fibrous things in it. So even, it's a little harder to see in this one because it's got so many pockets, and the light's not good in here, but you can still see on the side, the striations. I wish I could show it. I may have to take a picture of it and show it up close, but you can see, if someone takes clear pictures of it, you'll easily be able to tell if it's selenite or not. Like this one is actually a broken lamp that I got, but even inside it, it still has that powdery residue. So selenite will powder very easily if you drop it or anything like that. But yeah, there's a lot of people that charge a lot for selenite, and I don't understand why, because it's readily available everywhere. The majority of it comes from Pakistan and India, and it comes from other places too, but that is actually, it's the cheapest place to get it from, and it's actually the best that comes out of there. I have a couple of huge seer spears that have windows through them and so on, and I only paid like 50 bucks for them, and they're spheres about like this that are windowed, that are used for scrying. Colored selenite will always cost you more. I have some peach selenite. There's also lavender selenite. If you can find lavender selenite, that shit's expensive as hell. So if you ever find lavender or peach selenite and it's cheap, it's not real.
You trust me? I think I have to take a trip to India. I'm from India. I'm planning
Are you really?
I am. So I think I'm gonna go and look some crystals there. I never thought of that.
Yep. So yeah, bring me my sphere over there, April. I'm sorry, please. I should be like, bring me that shit. But I have a couple of, is that my window? Yeah. Hopefully I'll be able to show you guys. So this is one of my selenite. Oh yeah, I can. So see the window, you can see my finger through it. So, and then you can't see on the side. You can kind of see as it's shining, see the lines. Like this one is selenite. It's windowed selenite. So this piece right here should cost you a little bit more because it's hard to find windowed selenite. This is traditionally what was used as a crystal ball back before quartz was a big thing. This is one of my favorite pieces. And it, like I said, I wish I could show you guys. You can kind of see some of the striations in it. But this came from Pakistan. So, and like I said, it's one of my favorite pieces. I only paid $50 for this. And I say only because I've seen some go for much more, up in the like $75 to $80 range. So it's kind of up to you. As long as you pay attention to what you're doing when you're buying selenite, especially, it shouldn't cost you very much. It shouldn't cost you very much. Selenite's just super hard to fake. It's super hard to fake. As far as man-made crystals go, I love crystals, period. I love all of them. My dad, I'll just set this in my lap. My dad worked for refineries and things like that when I was growing up, and he traveled all over, and we were always in the mountains and so on. And he would take things that we found in Colorado, like up in the mountains, and make them into other things. Like he would make composites of different crystals and minerals and stuff like that in his shop. So I've always loved composite pieces. Even a man-made crystal has some of that crystal in it, if that makes sense. One of my favorite ones, I'm not a person that poo-poos fake crystals just because most turquoise on the market now is howlite. It's dyed howlite. I actually love howlite. Like I'm all about it. I have some good examples on my desk. That's why I'm kind of going down this road. But so I don't know if you guys can see the sheen on this where it's different colors. This is howlite, but it's angel aura howlite. So it means it's been heat treated with titanium to give it, I wish it would shine on here better, but it's got this beautiful rainbow aura to it. Titanium itself is a mineral, and it's an extremely tough mineral, hard to break, etc. So to me, I look at it as, okay, yes, you heat treated that or whatever, but you heat treated it with a metal, with an alloy that is extremely tough and durable. So now you've added all of the characteristics of titanium into that howlite. So that's the way I feel about it. I don't feel like you should pay the same amount for fake crystals as you should for real crystals, though. One of my other favorites, this one should glitter pretty easy for you guys. This one is actually purple sunstone. Purple is really, it's harder to find, but blue is everywhere and gold is everywhere. You guys have probably seen blue and gold. I can't ever remember what the gold is for. You'd think I would at this point. The blue is an amazingly protective stone. It also helps regulate your emotions and so on. The purple is a leadership, spiritual protective stone. So this piece sits on my desk, and I wish it would shine a little better because you can kind of see the circles in it. But this is one of my favorite pieces that I have. It's completely man-made. Sunstone or sandstone, sometimes you'll hear it called, is completely man-made. It's always going to have all that glitter in it. It's very flashy and pretty, but it's a stone that the metaphysical community really loves, like the way that it's made. It's glass and different things. I love it. It's one of my favorites. So it's up to you guys on personally how you feel about using stones that are man-made or not. Most emeralds anymore are lab created. Regular emeralds are very light and milky colored, whereas this isn't emerald, it's moldavite, but real emerald or emeralds you see in rings are going to look like this. They're going to be this color because they're lab created. So they're really dark. So most people think they have real emeralds and they don't. They are real, but they were lab created. I also look at that too, in that the lab created ones do help save the earth a little bit. They do help save some of the slave labor and things like that. So I personally don't mind using them. I'm just not going to pay the prices for them if they are lab created. So yeah, but there you go. As far as using selenite on your decks, it's up to you if you want to lay them on it, if you want to lay them against it, lay over it, whatever you want to do on there. So did I answer your question? I know it was a lot. So let's talk. Yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, if you're in India, you should or from India, you should totally go crystal hunting over there. There's some fabulous ones. So as far as shuffling goes, this is the next thing on my list here. As far as shuffling goes, shuffling is interesting because there are multiple ways to do it. Everybody is pretty much familiar with the Vegas style where you shuffle, you know, make the cool little bubble in the middle. I cannot do it to save my life, so I don't ever try. Mine end up all over the place when I do it. The way that I shuffle is more the traditional shuffling where it's kind of like this. I take them and I throw them. That came very easy to me. It doesn't always. So if you guys want to learn to, I have selenite all over my desk now. If you guys want to learn to shuffle like that, practice, practice, practice. You're always going to have a hand that it's easier to throw with and one that it's easier to catch with. If you guys are right-handed, I would recommend trying to throw with your right and hold with your left. I'm ambidextrous. I should have been left-handed, so I always want to throw with my left and catch with my right. The reason that I like shuffling this way is because if you guys notice when I shuffle, I always have things that come out like this. So I pay attention to that. So if I were shuffling for someone, I would pull that card out right there because it's almost out. I pay attention to the way that I shuffle, the way that the cards act when I shuffle, and the way that they act in general. Even if someone is in front of me and they're shuffling in the Vegas style, you can still pay attention to that. You have to pay attention to that because you're going to have cards that fly out. You're going to have cards that stick out. You're going to have cards that flip. They do different things. This is one of the things that you guys will notice right away when you're starting to watch other readers online is them either watching their cards or not watching their cards. You're also going to notice readers that say they'll have a card come out upside down and they'll literally turn it right side up. Don't ever do that because you just change the whole meaning of the read if you do that. And I usually just chalk that kind of to inexperience a little bit because they don't understand that something being upside down is important to that read. But when you're shuffling, and this goes for any way you shuffle, even if it's picking up the deck and cutting it, you know, like cutting it repeatedly or however you want to do it. Every time you do that, pay attention to how the cards end up back in the stack. So like I showed you, that one jumped, I don't know if you saw it, but like I showed you with when they stick up like this, when they're everywhere. If I'm shuffling for someone and they keep ending up like that repeatedly, without one in particular that jumps up or jumps out, but they're just kind of everywhere, that tells me that person is really kind of scatterbrained right now and they need to kind of focus a little bit. So usually what I do instead of telling the person in front of me to focus is I'll tell the cards, I'm like, I need you to focus, man. I need a card. I need you to focus. It kind of pulls that person in front of you back into like, oh shit, I need to focus. I need to pay attention. So they start focusing on the cards more. Usually I'll get a card for them on the next shuffle. Now there are times I'll shuffle and the cards will go back almost like this every time. That'll tell me the person is really closed off, that either they're not paying attention, they don't really want to hear what the cards have to say, or they just have a big wall up. So when that happens, I will tell the cards, I'm like, man, I just need a card. Like, I just need you to open up a little bit. I talk to my cards a lot. Sometimes it's because I just talk to my cards, but if I have someone in front of me and I keep seeing that they're very closed off or they're scatterbrained, I'll talk to my cards to pull that person back to what I'm doing, back to what they should be focusing on. As far as when I haven't used these in a while, so they're wanting to jump everywhere. As far as when cards fly out, this is really important. So say I had this card, it flew out and it landed on the desk and then it spun a little bit. And so now it's sitting like this. I leave it like that. I don't turn it. I don't move it. I leave it in this position that it's in. Perfect. I'm glad. I was like, let me look at the cards so I can see which one's easier to explain. So this card in particular is the "You Are Worthy" card. If this is right side up, that means if I'm reading for myself, whatever the situation is I'm reading for, I need to stop questioning myself. I need to realize that I can do this. I am worthy of everything, etc. But if it lands upside down, that means something completely different, depending on the cards around it. It could mean that they have all these other cards telling them that they're going down the wrong path. So then I wouldn't read this as, oh my God, you don't need all of those blessings. It's not that. It's that, hey, you're going down the wrong path. That's why you feel like you're not connecting with anything. Now, if it's Whopper Jaw, that's completely different. Because then you really have to look at the cards around it before you ever say what this card is. Sideways cards, I always take as neutral. It's not that you deserve this or deserve that, or you don't deserve this or you don't deserve that. Right now, everything in that card is neutral. So it really depends on the cards around it. Now, if you're just drawing one card, then you can interpret it for what question you are asking. But you guys are going to see, and you probably have seen a lot of readers that they'll have a card come out upside down and they'll turn it, or they have a card that comes out kind of sideways and they'll turn it. That just changed the whole aspect of the reading. Because if I had, let's see here, trying to find a good one, this one work. So if I have the Thunder card come out as an anchor card, the Thunder in this deck is power, it's energy, it's buildup. If I have this card come out like this and say this card is next, you deserve good things. You're building up all of this energy in this situation because yes, you do deserve those things. Now, if this is upside down, that changes the whole meaning of what those two cards mean. Do you see what I'm saying? It now says that there doesn't need to be this big buildup because you deserve the things, the good things that are happening now. You don't need to change things. So if I were reading, say I was reading for a cat and this came up, but this was upside down, she may have a situation that she was asking about or wanting to know about. Should she move forward with something or not? If it's like this, okay, you don't need to move forward right now because you deserve the things, the good things that are going on right now. Enjoy them right now. But if I were to take this card and turn it, I'm literally going to tell her the opposite thing. Oh yeah, you need to move forward. But that's not the way the card fell. So now I've given her the wrong path to take. I've found that whenever I don't pay attention to the cards being a certain way, and this is why I stopped, because I used to at least turn them completely right side up or upside down. If they fell out sideways or whopper jawed, I would turn them completely upside down or right side up. And I found out that when I did that, the rest of the line didn't feel right. In my gut, it didn't feel right when I was looking at it. So I only did that for like a month or two when I started reading professionally, and I stopped touching the cards at all once they fell. It made my reads go from this to like spot on with everything. One of the other things that you guys want to make sure you do when the cards come out, when you have everything laid out, and I'll talk about if you pick them or if you shuffle them in just a second, or let the person pick them, excuse me. Don't feel like you have to immediately start talking once you have the line spread out in front of you. In fact, I don't ever recommend that. ever. We'll just use these two cards again. If these two cards came out, what I would look at would be the numbers on both cards. I would look at the colors. I would look at the symbolism. I would look at all the other cards around them. Are there birds in every card? Is there a full moon in every card? Is there a number 1 on every card? Are they all the same color? And yes, it seems like a lot, but even if you're reading from the same deck, do that. Stop and look at everything. Study everything on those cards. Pay attention to what you feel in your gut right away. Pay attention to all the symbolism you see. And there are a lot of times when I will see the same number in every card and I'll point it out to the person and they'll almost always say, well, what does that mean? I have no problem admitting that I am not a numerologist. Like, I'm only pointing it out because it's in every damn card. I'm not a numerologist. I am not going to memorize what every single number means. I know a couple of them and that's about it. Same thing with astrology. If I have cards that keep pointing out Capricorn symbolism, I am a Capricorn, so I know enough about a Capricorn to say, okay, it's telling you this. But other ones, I don't know. And so don't ever be afraid, guys. If you're reading for somebody and some symbolism comes up, animals are another one, I'm not going to memorize what every animal is. I know what some of them are. That's about it. Don't ever feel like you have to know everything. People will trust you more if you're honest with them and say, hey, I'm not a numerologist, man. Like, you can totally Google it. You can look it up, but sometimes it's also that they need to read what that is. They need to read what an eagle is for. So yeah. Oh, okay. So don't ever feel like you have to know everything.
Hey, so you spoke about cards being upside down, cards being on the side. What if a card is angled when it fell down or it flew out?
So that's usually what I call whopper jawed. So if a card is angled, let me find a good one here. Okay. So if a card is angled, say this Thunder card comes out like this. It's not upside down, but it's not sideways. This is when I say whopper jaw, this is what I mean, that it's weird. So this right here, depending on where it falls, if it were to fall like this, and this is my anchor card going forward, this would tell me that there's a lot of energy buildup that's going like this. Like this person has felt this energy moving up here, but it's not complete yet. So whatever the situation is that's in this whole line, this energy is shifting upwards. It's moving toward it. If it's whopper jawed down like this, I usually take that as it's going like this, like the energy is depleting. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. So that's how I take it when I see a card that's weird like that. And every deck you have is going to be a little, it's going to have a little bit of a different meaning. This is also why you want to stop and you want to look over every card and study it before you say anything. So I'll usually study for a minute and then I take a deep breath and then I start talking. So I also apparently have a problem keeping my face quiet. So sometimes when I'm reading, I'll smile or I'll giggle a little bit or I'll frown. I need to stop it, but I can't. I'm not a good poker player. I've never been a good poker player. So just know that there are going to be times you're going to have cards come out and you're going to be ready to read for somebody and your face is going to give away something and you'll hear them go, what's wrong? You know what I mean? You'll hear that. It's not, it just is what it is. It will happen as you guys start reading. You'll have things come out and your face will kind of give things away before you ever open your mouth. So just know that that's going to happen, because when you're studying your cards, instead of immediately starting to talk, that person in front of you is going to get very quiet. They're going to stop talking because they're going to study the cards too. And they're going to study everything that you're doing. They're going to study your body language. They're going to study your hands. They're going to study your face. They're going to watch you intently. So just know that when you study your cards before you talk to them, they're going to be watching you like a hawk. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, but just know that they're going to be watching you like a hawk. With studying your cards too. And I really encourage you guys after this to go and watch some of the readers on social media. The ones that stop and look and pay attention to their cards before they ever say anything. I never say never or always, but I never say never. They're almost always going to be spot on and more correct than other readers are. So it immediately makes you look more professional. It doesn't make you look like you don't know what your cards say. It makes you look more professional. Plus, now you're going to pay more attention to everything. So when you start reading for that person, you immediately look more professional because you're like, well, okay, I noticed that there's threes on all of these cards and this card has 3 birds in it and this has 3 trees. You know what I mean? You're going to immediately look way more professional to the person sitting in front of you because you notice all this other stuff. So don't ever hesitate to take your time and pay attention to every one of those cards. It will set you completely apart from other people. Are there any more questions about the way cards come out or anything before we start talking about layouts and so on? Plus I needed a drink. So as far as layouts go, there are so many really cool layouts you guys can find online. Every single deck you get will have a book or a downloadable book that will have layouts in them as well. Here's what I recommend. Create your own. Create your own layout. We'll talk about why here in just a second. With any layout, here's the cool thing about it. Unless the person in front of you reads professionally, etc., they have no idea if the layout you're doing is right or wrong. They don't. Now, if you're just pulling 3 cards, it's really hard to screw that up. 3 cards or 5 cards, same thing. Even with 5 cards, you can lay them in a row. You can make a star. You can lay them straight. They don't know that you don't normally read like that. Trying to figure out why my dog is making that noise. Sorry, I was trying to figure out if he was stuck or like what's going on. Let me see what's going on. He never makes that noise, so that's why I got a little worried because I didn't know what was going on. So with cards in general, when you do a layout, first, I recommend starting with doing a single card for yourself every day. Then do a 3 card for yourself every day. And I know it's hard to do it every day. I can't do it every day, trust me. But it will help you learn each deck you have. And I recommend if you do a 3 card, pull a card from 3 different decks. Pull a card from whatever you feel you need that day. It will help you learn those cards. It will help you learn how to read the interactions with all of those cards for whatever the deck is for. But it will also help you practice as if someone were in front of you. Practice studying your cards. Practice looking at everything, etc. As far as longer, bigger layouts go, even when I first started reading professionally, I've never really used anyone else's layout, ever. Mainly because I have that authority complex and I'm like, oh, I'm going to make my own. I know better. But the other part is because I'm very intuitive with my reading. So even if I'm doing a past, present, future, and that's normally just 3 lines, I also have kind of a where you are and where you're going that tells me mentally, emotionally where you are. With the line, it may be I can lay everything in a straight line. It may be that I feel things have to be split in some areas. Maybe I picked a deck and I had 2 cards come out of 3 decks in a row and then back to 1 at the end. That tells me, okay, I need to put those 2 next to each other. Don't ever feel like you guys have to stick to one specific layout, especially with Oracle cards. Just keep in mind, Oracle are not tarot. They are completely separate, all on their own. One of the cool things about it too is that if you have someone come sit in front of you and say they need to know about their job, they need to know, should they make a career change? Should they go for this promotion? Whatever it is, they need to know about their job. And you start pulling cards and you're like, okay, normally, you know, in your mind, you're thinking, normally I would do this, you know, I would put a layout here, a line here, a line here, a line here. But I feel like I need to put something else here. I'll tell the person that I'm creating a special layout for them, for their situation. And I do that for two reasons. One, because every single person that comes in front of you is different. Their relationship issues, their job, their home life, everything about them is different. It's not, you're never going to have the same exact person come in front of you and two different people. It just, nobody is the same. Everybody is different. And two, it tells that person in front of you that they are very special, that they are very unique, and that you saw something different in them, that they needed a unique read, a unique layout. So that in turn does a couple of different things in their mind. It makes them appreciate you more, and it makes them listen more, because now you've told them their situation is special enough that they have to have a special layout, a special read. Okay, there's some information here I really need to pay attention to. And two, they're going to tell every single person that when they went to see you and you read for them, that you created a layout just for them. So now you have all these people talking about how cool it was that you created a layout just for them. It does amazing things for the person in front of you too. Especially when they're there for, everybody that gets a reading is there for a reason. They have something they need to know about. It may seem trivial to some people, and some people may never tell you the full reason they're in front of you. They may just say, oh, I need to know about my job. I need to know about my family. They may not tell you that they just lost their mother-in-law, their dad, their uncle, you know what I mean? Like, they may not tell you all the heaviness going on. So you creating a specific layout for them, or you putting the cards where you feel those cards need to go, and allowing the universe and the cards to determine what information comes out for that person, will always give you an amazing read for that person in front of you. Instead of trying to specifically go, okay, well, I can only have 3 cards in this line and 1 card in this line and 5 in this line, so I can't pull out these other cards. When you use a layout, a set layout, it handicaps you in a way, because now it's taken away other cards that that person may need to hear. I also found that if you're trying to follow a specific structured layout, you have other cards fly out, you ignore those other cards. They'll go back in the deck. When I have other cards come out, I had a lady that I read for the other day that I was just doing a past, present, future, the lines, you know, past, present, future. I had where she was and where she was going, which usually only have 2 cards in them a piece. But as I was shuffling, that pile's over here. And as I'm shuffling here, I would have cards fling out, literally fling out and go into that pile. And it always cracks me up when that happens. I'm just like, okay, then. So by the time I got done shuffling and we got to that pile, there were like 6 cards instead of 2 in that pile. And it was because she had a whole separate issue that she didn't mention to me. And so when I started reading, I was like, I'm not sure what this is in this next, you know, like, I'm going to say 8 months or so, blah, 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 blah. And her jaw just dropped. And she was like, I don't know how you would have known about that. I was like, well, I didn't really. I mean, but if I had been paying attention to a specific layout, I would have taken those cards and put them in the pile here where I thought they went, or I'd have put them back in the deck. And it turns out that what that was at the end of that was what she actually wanted to know about. She needed to know about all this job wise, but the stuff over here was something that was very serious. And even afterwards, she was like, I didn't even really think that I needed to be worried about that. So trust your gut, guys. Always trust your gut, and don't ever feel like you have to follow someone else's layout, because you're going to handicap things that that person may need to hear. The way I look at it is that when more cards fly out than the one I'm asking for or the two I'm asking for, it's because that person probably has a lot of signs that have been hitting them in the face and they're ignoring them. So now they're in front of somebody, me, you, etc. They're in front of somebody that's open and has access to all of these messages, and that person's actually going to listen to what you have to say. That's why all those cards are going to come out. So as far as layouts and stuff go, or any of that we just talked about, what kind of questions do you guys have about that, or situations, scenarios, etc.?
So how you will define the person's, like the example that you gave, whether it's a scattered brain related work or it is something that a person should know?
So what do you mean? Like the
So
way
like
the cards shuffle or the way they come out?
the way they come out, because sometimes a lot can be going on a person's mind, right? So maybe while not shuffling, while the cards flew out, there can be a lot of multiple cards.
Right.
So how
So
do
here's
you?
how I tell the difference. And a lot of it I
Mhm.
tell in the way that the cards act when I'm shuffling. So that's why I was
Mhm.
talking about, like, whenever, and I'm making them do this right now, but whenever I shuffle and they go like this, and say I shuffle 6 times and I keep getting this,
Mhm.
that tells me this person has a lot on their mind. They're very scatterbrained, and they don't even know what they need to know, if that makes sense. Now, if I'm shuffling and say that might be happening, but I shuffle and say, when I shuffle, I have a card that flings out into a spot over here, I'll usually leave that card there. Now, if it's that many cards, I'll flat tell my card. I'm like, that's too many, man. I'm not doing that. Like, I'll tell my cards that, like, I'm not doing that. If it's just one or maybe even 2 cards, I'll leave it there. If it's a lot, it goes back in the deck. And that's again why I say it out loud, because I want the person in front of me to focus. Because when they hear that I got onto my cards, then they're like, oh, I wasn't focusing. And sometimes they'll even tell you that too. They'll go, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't really paying attention. But I've also noticed that when I have cards that will fling out like that, they almost always end up in the same pile. They make their own pile. And so that's why I just leave it there. But it can get to the point where it's too many. And if it starts to, like I said, I'll talk to my cards. I'll say, no, man, like, that's too much. It's too much. I'm not doing that. So, because you may have somebody come in front of you that they need to hear a lot, and you don't have 2 hours to spend with them. So some of it's trusting your gut.
Mhm.
But yeah, I always pay attention in the shuffle, how that person mindset wise is in front of me. So did that answer your question?
It does. And when you're shuffling, right? So a person comes with you a question, but maybe like, so how do you decide the decks? Do you always like go maybe one love deck, one shadow deck, one of your anchor deck? How do you decide
Okay.
all of that?
So here's how I decide. Like I said, I have 4 decks that are anchor decks that get used in every single reading. So I always have a shadow deck. I always have that first deck that gives me just that one word of, this is kind of where their mindset is right now. So I do that with the shadow deck. That gives me a really good overview of where that person is right then. I don't usually use my first 2 anchor decks in my read. I have a couple of shadow work decks. So if I feel I need to use it, then I'll use a different shadow work deck. But then I have the other anchor deck that is the very first card in that line. From there, I just intuitively pick. Like I said, all my cards are over here. So if I'm going to do a reading for somebody, I will put my anchor cards out here because I know I'm going to use them. And then I will go through and I'll put my other decks out. Now, if I know that they're wanting a relationship reading, I will put out decks. I will put out my relationship decks. If they don't say what they're wanting, I will put out most of the decks I have. And I literally will just kind of run my hand over them. And sometimes I'll pick up a deck and I'll start to shuffle with it. And I'll go, okay, nope, because it just feels wrong. And I'll put it back down. But I just intuitively pick. And then I always close it up with one of the anchor decks I have, either the healing deck or that Isis deck that I have. It's here lately been the healing deck almost every time. So it's really up to you. This is also where you want to know at least what that deck is for. So like I have a Starseed deck. I don't use in every reading. There are times I'll use it in almost every reading I have during a day. And other days I'm like, I don't feel like I need you today. Then I have like a past life reading deck that only comes out if I'm doing a past life reading. But with the other ones, in knowing what those decks are for, because like I have some that are just general decks. I have some that are motivational decks. I have some that are like this one here is an interesting deck. It's kind of motivational, but at the same time, it's kind of a kick in the butt. Like if somebody's not listening. Then I have some that are very, very mystical. I have some that are very scientific. I have geometric decks. Like it's just kind of knowing the overview of what that deck is. So when you're going to pick decks, say you're going to choose 5 different decks for this line in the middle. You have your anchor card, and then maybe you feel like you need another shadow work card. And then it's just how you feel. It's hard to explain. This is where trusting your gut comes in tremendously. And with trusting your gut, that also goes in with what you say when you're reading the cards. For me, it's something I had to fight forever because I'm that person that I'm a perfectionist. My Capricorn self hates to be wrong. And so I put it in air quotes because it's hard to explain that. It's like you hear in your head what you need to say to the person, and it's not words you normally use. It's not how you talk, etc. So for a while, I would try to make it into my own words. And then I got to the point where I couldn't say something how I was hearing it. I couldn't get it into my words. So I was like, I don't know why, but I need to say this like this. And the person in front of me almost instantly started crying. And they're like, that's something my grandpa used to say to me all the time. So you have to really trust your own self, trust what you're feeling or hearing inside on picking those decks, on saying what's coming to your mind, etc. Because you're being pointed to use those decks. You're being pointed to say those words for that particular person. I was going to say something else too, and it just went out of my brain. So, but I don't know if that answered your question or not. It's really all intuitive based when you're picking decks, unless you're just using one deck to read from. And then it's pretty easy. So if you guys are wanting to really work on trusting your gut, trusting what you say, then I would say only use 1 or 2 decks. If you're wanting to boost your intuition on which decks to pick, then I would use multiple decks. But it's a good thing to practice with somebody who will tell you the truth, who will tell you honestly how the reading is. And here's one thing I would recommend too. If you have somebody that you can practice with that will tell you honestly, to really, really boost your intuition and to boost you hearing that voice or knowing what to say correctly, give the person in front of you parameters on what they can and can't say. It's an exercise that a lot of people do to boost their clairs. And this is by doing a reading, doing some kind of divination, or just talking to that person and making up a story for that person's life. They're allowed to only say yes or no. And tell them they're only really allowed to say yes. They can only give a yes answer. They cannot build on that answer, but they cannot physically tell you, no, you're wrong. They might be able to shake their head no or something, but it's not that you don't need to know when you're wrong, but you don't need to know when you're wrong. Because if you put in your head when you're doing this exercise that these cards are going to tell you everything, that you will know everything about the person in front of you, and you're reading for them, and say you tell them that they have a big brown dog, they might have a big black dog. So they're allowed to say, yes, I have a big dog. They're not allowed to say, no, that's wrong. Because as soon as you hear no, as soon as you hear that's wrong, it cuts off all of your intuition. It cuts off everything. Your brain goes, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing. And so it's almost like you squash all your intuition in that voice. So I would highly recommend practicing with someone that's willing to do that with you, and willing to give you yes or no answers, willing to say, yes, I do have a big dog, and not, well, my dog's black, not brown. Because even that, you're going to go, I got it wrong. Do you see what I'm saying? So try to practice with somebody that will do that for you, or even each other.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So what other questions do we have, ladies? Y'all are a little easier today because it's a small class. Because normally I get bombarded with questions. No more questions, really? No questions at all? I love that, Haley. You said you don't use layout. I completely agree. Haley said, I don't know if you guys can see the chat or not, but Haley said that when she tries to use a layout, she feels like it stifles the reading. That's exactly how I feel as well. It makes you stick to a specific number, a specific way of putting the cards down and everything. So it can get to the point where you disconnect from what you're trying to do, because everything is so stifled in that layout.
So once you start reading different cards, right? Do you shuffle them, like you put them in different orders once you study them, or it's like one sweep go for the cards?
What do you mean? Like whenever you've got them laid out, or whenever you're doing a different reading for a different person?
So given an example that I took 3 decks, right? And I took different cards out of those decks based on after the shuffling and everything. And they are in a certain way. I'm not going to like turn, like, flip the card. Like if it's downwards, I'm not going to flip them upwards. Right. But changing the position, like given an example, if I'm looking at my table, the card is on 5th position, but I saw a card with maybe same number in the 1st position. So I moved the 5th card onto the number 2nd because they share the same number, or something like that. Seeing a pattern, making sure all the patterns stick together, and something different.
So I see what you're saying. So it's up to you if you want to move those cards. I don't ever move them from how they laid out. The only time I move cards is if I know I need more room, and I'm like, okay, let me take a picture of this and I'm going to stack these over here. But once you start taking the time, once a line is out or a layout is out, taking that few minutes, second, whatever before, and studying those synchronicities, the numbers, the colors, the animals, all that will start to they'll just glow in your face. So it's not like you really don't have to move anything around. But I do understand what you're saying, because I have seen readers do that, where they will say I have a friend, she works in Vegas, and this is kind of how she reads, and I'll tell you, and it may resonate with you more. So what she does is she actually has, I want to say it's 4 or 5 decks, and she puts them together as one deck. So they're all together. And when she shuffles, she'll lay out, she'll tell the person to pick a number between 5 and 15 or whatever. So let's say they pick 7, she'll lay out 7 cards, and then she'll turn those cards over. And then she sits there for about a minute and a half, and she will actually move the cards around. I don't know, I can't read this way, but this may be what you're talking about. But if there's eagle cards, she puts them together. If there are purple cards, she puts them together. it's almost like a Sudoku puzzle
Mhm.
where she'll put like the eagles here, but then all these are purple. And that's how she reads. And it's really complicated. And it's the way that she started reading as a kid. She wasn't
Mhm.
taught. It's just how she made this layout, how she reads. So I don't know if that is more like what you were asking about, but
Yeah.
it's fantastic the way she reads. It's fantastic. But it does take a little bit of studying once the cards are all out, of studying them and putting them in a specific order. To me, it's really complicated, but I love watching her do it. I love watching her do it. So I don't know, that may resonate with you more in being able to move the cards around and put them in like that kind of puzzle form in a way, because it
Yeah.
is like a puzzle. Whenever you turn these
Mhm.
cards over, it's exactly like a puzzle.
Yeah, because trust me, I have never done any card reading. Trust me, never, ever, ever in my life. I was recently drawn to oracle cards because I had a reading and someone told me that I have an intuitive side. So that's why I thought maybe I should learn a little bit more. And I know nothing about tarot cards, know nothing about oracle cards. So that's why I was asking these questions. And so a pattern is that, do you read it like maybe in one direction, maybe like going left to right, right to left, or how do you do that?
So because I should be left-handed, I tend to do everything from left to right. I know people that are right-handed that read from right to left.
Mhm.
So it's kind of all how you feel too, because I have friends that are from Korea that they read top to bottom
Mhm.
because that's how they grew up reading. Is
Mhm.
so if you grew up reading from right to left, that's going to be more comfortable to you. And I mean like book reading, you know what I mean? Like reading a sentence.
Mhm.
So do how it feels comfortable for you. Because with me, I have certain layouts that there's times when I do a past, present, future spread that I'll lay them out like this, like long ways, and I'll read from top to bottom. And then there's sometimes that I'll lay them out like this, and I'll still read top to bottom on those, but I'll read left to right. So I think that's the thing I love the most about Oracle cards, is because I'm very intuitive and connected to my own intuition. And so it's easier for me to get an accurate reading instead of trying to follow somebody else's layout, somebody else's practice. So I would really say just to start practicing, just to start drawing the cards for you each day, and really just play with them. Decide you want to know about something specific, a big huge thing in your life, and draw yourself a big layout for however many cards you feel. Like draw you a past, present, future, and have a card at the top, and then kind of go from there, however many you feel. And then the next day, do just 3 cards or do just 1 card. Do you see what I'm saying? And then as you're reading, if you have that huge layout, say you have 10 cards in front of you, and you look at it and you go, okay, I see that all these are the same, so I'm going to put these in a line. And I see all these are the same, I'm going to put these in a line. However, and read each way and write down or like voice record yourself interpreting the cards and take a picture of it so you'll know. So that way you can go back later and go, okay, I was spot on here, but not with this. So maybe I shouldn't move them. Or holy shit, I was really spot on with this. So that's what I'm going to do every time. But record yourself, record the reading, record what you're seeing, what you're saying, etc. I have a feeling you're one of those people that reads, it's going to be reading a lot differently than a lot of people, just because I can, even though in my brain I can't words correctly what you're saying, I understand what you're saying when you're talking about moving the cards and this and that. I have a feeling you're going to be one of those people that kind of reads like my friend in Vegas. So yeah, don't ever feel like you have to completely read the way someone else does. That's why I structure this the way I do. And I don't say, okay, here's this layout and here's this layout and you have to stick to it, because you're going to be right. You're going to have good reads. It's not, you won't have a good read with a layout, but with Oracle cards in particular, you want to give yourself the freedom to add, to take away, to change, to modify. And you're going to get an amazing read. It takes your readings from here to like pinpoint every time.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
you're welcome. I may have to see if I can find a video of my friend and send it to you. She doesn't usually video a lot because she's very, very private about it. But I may have to see if I can find something, because the way she reads is just, it's uber cool. She's really cool.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's see. Usually, see what everyone says. Yeah. Why do you doubt yourself? So here's one thing I will say about boosting your intuition and about doubting yourself and so on. And I talk about this in almost every class I teach, not just Oracle cards, is that this will also help you strengthen your clairs too. Create yourself an email address and a second email address. Only use it for one thing, and that is emailing yourself card readings, emailing yourself dreams you had, emailing yourself, man, I don't know why, but I have this sinking feeling for like 2 weeks that, you know, my Uncle Paul is going to get in a real bad car wreck. Email that to yourself, all of it. So what that does is when you first start doing it, you're only going to be emailing a sentence or two. Then it'll get to the point where it's paragraph. Then it'll get to the point where it's a couple paragraphs. Then it'll be like, oh my God, I'm writing a fucking novel. I got to stop. But
This really works.
it does a lot for you because it tells your brain when you get a feeling, when you get a card reading, when anything intuitive, it tells your brain immediately, oh God, I'm going to get pop quizzed. I got to remember more and more and more. So your intuition will go from only seeing this much to seeing more than you can imagine. 2, it gives you something with a time and a date stamp that can't be changed to prove to yourself, okay, I did see that happening. My cards did tell me this was going to happen. You can go back through and look, and you have a written record of it. Plus, like I said, a time and a date stamp. So not only will it help you build your intuition by telling your brain that you're going to pop quiz it, it will help you pinpoint things. It will help you get more information, and it will help you trust yourself. The trust, that is the huge issue. That's where almost every card reader or divination reader that I know, even ones that have been reading for years, still have issues with that. I have issues with that sometimes, especially when I'm doing any kind of ancestor reads, mediumship reads, even though I've done it forever. And I know if I'm hearing this or seeing this or smelling this or whatever, fucking say it. There's still times in my mind I'm like, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if I'm wrong? So part of it is because we've been conditioned for so long, especially in the US and stuff, to think that all this is evil, and using that intuition means there's something wrong with you or whatever. So we have to fight against our own logic in that aspect. But using that email address, you guys will find that you'll start using it more and more and more. Like I voice record dreams. I will voice record or voice text card readings to myself, things like that, because my brain, my mouth is going to work much faster than my fingers can type anyway. So you, Haley, you'd be surprised how your intuition will go through the roof with that. It'll make you trust yourself more. It's kind of hard to completely obliterate that feeling of worry, or that worry that you're going to be wrong. I know people that have been reading for 50 something years and they still fight with it sometimes. And it blows my mind to hear that, because I'm like, you've never been wrong. I've known you so long, you've never been wrong. So to know that they still, it does make you feel a little better though, because then you're like, okay, good. I'm not the only one that, worries about being wrong all the time. So it's just human. So, but yeah, the email thing, I teach that in every every class, like my mentorship classes, my shaman classes, my dream classes, this class, like I talk about it in every single one of those. And the reason I like email over physically writing it in a book is because physically writing in a book can get damaged. Somebody could take it. You know what I mean? Like it can disappear and then it's gone. Also, I was married to someone who questioned everything I did. So if I wrote something down, even if I put a date on it, I would have them say, well, you could have just wrote that this morning. You could have wrote that just now. So my brain was like, okay, motherfucker, well, let me email it, because then it puts a time and a date stamp on. You can't change. You can't change that time and date stamp. And then also, even if they destroy your computer, it's still in your email somewhere. So it's never going to go away. It's going to be there. Unless you physically go in and delete it.
More
But
likely to do it too.
but yeah, that's what April said. You're more likely to do it too. This is why I have a love-hate relationship with voice text, because it doesn't like my accent apparently. And so I got screwed because I grew up in Oklahoma. So I have kind of an accent. Well, I was born here and I live here now, but I was raised in Colorado where they talk really fast. So I have an accent and I talk really fast. And so when I'm voice texting, my phone makes it sound like I'm just fucked up. But I love being able to voice to text on an email and get everything out right then when I'm seeing it. So I highly, highly recommend doing that, guys. And that, like I said, it will help you trust your gut so much. It's not even funny. That scared the hell out of me. It must be the mailman. So what other questions do we have, guys, as my dogs are crazily barking? That scared the daylights out of me. Oh. So no more questions at all? Like I said, y'all are pretty easy because there was a small amount of you today. So,
What's a good shadow deck?
ooh, a good shadow deck. So the Dark Mirror is my favorite. I may have to unbury it. Let me find it. But it's the one that I read with. Where are you? It's the one that I read with all the time online. She's buried, but it's the Dark Mirror and it's on Amazon. It's less than $15, I think. But it's very easy to learn, very easy to read with, and the artwork is fabulous. So I'll type that out and I'll type out, there's another one that I have that I really love too. And they're both cheap but great decks. So
Cool.
So
Thank you.
yeah. The other one is called Mausolea, like mausoleum, but Mausolea. That one is great for single card pulls. Like if you're doing the Mausolea, if you're working on something for yourself or you have someone in front of you that you kind of need to know headspace wise where they're at and what they need to work on, that one has specific people on it. And what I love about that deck is that it has things from everywhere from Judaism to Christianity to Shakespeare to Egyptian. I mean, it's just this wide range of beings and people. And it has an overall theme of the card and then shadow work aspects at the bottom. Yeah, like Haley said, the Dark Mirror is very straightforward. It is not going to sugarcoat shit. It is kind of in your face with it, but it's fantastic. Both of those are fabulous decks. And I bought mine about 2 or 3 years ago, both of them. And I think then they were only like 14 something. So they can't be too much. A past, present, and future deck. Let me see the names of some of these decks. So here, let me type these in here because I have a few that are good for that. Sacred Destiny. And that is 5. That's a good one. That one's one I use all the time for it. Oh, here we go. So the Halloween Oracle deck is also a really, really good one for past, present, and future. The artwork is just beautiful on it. The backs, not so much. The backs look like a kid's party favor. I don't care for the backs of them, but they're larger cards and they're just fantastic. They're wonderful for past, present, future. I'm looking at some of the other cards. I had one deck that I can't remember. Oh, there it is. Sacred Spirit. There we go. This one right here is great too. Anna Stark. Yeah. That one's really good too. All three of those are really good for past, present, future, and for anything really that you can need. So you can pull a 3 card, you can pull a whole spread with them, you can pull a single card. I wish I could find the box for this other one because this other deck I have is fantastic, but I guess I don't. I'm irritated at myself right now. Kat, I'll find the box to this other deck because it's this deck right here. And I can't find the box. I have almost all my boxes right there, so I don't know where this one is. But like, it's very straightforward with everything. So it's really good to use on a daily basis. It's good to use for past, present, future. It's good for in the middle of a layout. Like, it's just a fantastic deck. That's what I kept looking down there for, because like you can see a lot of my boxes, but they're not all there. So I got to find the box for that one because I, for the life of me, can't remember the name of it. Can't
And
remember.
for the love
you.
deck?
Do what?
Love deck?
So for the love deck, I actually created my own because I
Okay.
couldn't find one that had everything I need in it. So on that one, I can't really give you a good answer. There are a whole bunch of them out there. I bought a couple and I used them both maybe once and then gifted them because I just didn't connect with them. I didn't resonate with them. I will say here's another one that's really good though. So I have no idea where the box is for these cards, but this is the Witches Oracle deck. And I put in there the black backings because it's obvious. There's a couple of Witches Oracles, but this is the back of these. These are fantastic in that they're beautiful. They're very straightforward. They also have a lot of metaphysical and magical things in them. They have different monsters, things like that. This is a fantastic deck and it's small. So this is about half the deck, but it's small. So it's easy to read with. And the box itself is black and purple and it has a really beautiful little witch on the front of it. I want to say that one may be in the $20, $25 range, but that one's a really fantastic deck. That one's fantastic. But yeah, as far as relationship ones go, you'd think I'd be like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. But I don't have one that I really like. So I don't know if anybody here has one that they like for relationships, but that's one that I ended up creating my own. I created my own on that one. So clairsentience is strong. Any guidance for getting that? Take a back seat. So if your clairsentience is really strong, I would start incorporating, trying to use that in a reading, because there's a reason that one player is stronger for you than others. With mine, my clairaudience is through the roof. And so what sucks about that is you think it's great until your clairaudience is through the roof. But The sucks about it is I'll be reading cards in my mind. I'm like, okay, that's saying this. These are the points I need to bring out. And then I start hearing things and it distracts me from what I was just doing. So it's kind of irritating, but I try to play into that. I try to just embrace it now, because I used to be like, shut up. Like, I need to focus over here, but it's because what they're trying to tell me was really important. So the same thing with clairvoyance and things like that. If you guys have one clair that is much stronger than the other clairs, it's because that's where your talent lies. Chakra hits are emotions. So emotions can be a great thing to be able to read, though, especially in card readings. Because if you're looking at a specific card for this person in front of you and you start feeling really angry or this, okay, so that tells me whatever the situation is, they have an intense anger with it. They have an intense sadness with it. So you can start learning to read those emotions into those cards. See, it's hard for me to say to dumb one down, because sometimes when you start pushing it down, it stops working as well. And I wouldn't ever want one to stop working as well. Chakra hits are interesting too, because that is an aspect of that person, their emotions, and physically what's going on with them, where they're having a lot of problems. So if you're reading, like I said, you're reading a specific line or whatever, and you start feeling like, you know, their throat chakra is all fucked up, like that's pretty easy. Like, okay, depending on what the cards say, you know, you're not speaking your truth. You're not saying this, you're not doing that. So yeah, I would, with clairaudience, trying to boost that one, that's where working with that intuition and working with your writing everything down is going to help a lot. And if you guys have not ever read The Psychic Witch, that one is fantastic, the book, and it's on Audible too. It's fantastic for helping you boost your clairs. There's a lot of exercises in there that are great. They're really, really great. So yeah. So I would go through on The Psychic Witch and do some of those exercises, like the one in the rose, with the rose and stuff. That one will help you tremendously. I've used that one and modified it over the years for different things. Like as you start to really hone in, like, okay, I've got this exercise down, change it a little bit, shift it a little bit, you know, for something different, something bigger. Because with me, like I said, my clairaudience is really strong. And so my clairsentience is as well, but I've learned to kind of move them. So like when I'm doing energy reads, I let my clairsentience come out more. And when I'm reading cards or reading ancestor readings, then my clairaudience comes out. But, I don't know. Why you gotta ask me?
I just want to know.
April asks me weird questions all the time. I'm like, why you gotta ask me that? But one thing I will tell you though, is that when I really started working on my clairaudience to be able to do mediumship reads and stuff, I quit paying as much attention to clairvoyance, and that's gone down. And so that's one right now that I'm trying to boost back up. So you have to kind of be careful in how much you dumb one down, and you know what I mean, when you're trying to work with them. So learning to integrate them all together, and how to kind of, in my mind, what I see is one of those old school 1970s dimmer switches. You know what I'm talking about? They're like kind of tan colored, and you had to like kind of really be careful, but they really dimmed or brightened, whatever. Like that's what I picture in my mind whenever I'm trying to move one down or move one up, is that. So have something in your mind that you can use to, and it sounds dumb, but it works. The more you use it, it works. I tried a toggle switch for a while and it would just turn it off or on. And I'm like, okay, that didn't work. Doesn't work. Yeah, I actually, and that's one thing that a lot of mentors will tell you too. My mentor, that was one of the things she told me, and she's in her 70s now, but she was like, when I was a kid, it was so cool for us to have these dimmer switches in our new house. And she was like, so that's what I always associate with mine. I was like, that's kind of cool, because I remember that in the 80s as a kid, like my friends had those in their houses. We didn't have any. So So I was fascinated with theirs. I wanted to just like see how high I could get the light or, so yeah. So that's what I do. So yeah. Well, ladies, let me stop this recording so it can scream at me.